أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So what happens is that there's something called survival mode. Okay, and when we are in survival mode as human beings, our body goes into something called fight or flight. You guys have all heard this terminology. Now, fight or flight, if you look at it from a deeper perspective, it is our body's way of surviving a threat. Okay, I see a threat, I realize I'm not safe, my body goes into survival mode. Now, fight or flight are, fight is basically that I am going to confront the threat, okay? Flight is that I'm going to avoid the threat, which is also another type of survival mechanism. But then they find that there are two more survival mechanisms in addition to fight and flight, and those are freeze and fawn. Now, what's freeze? Freeze is when you basically you kind of go numb. It's one psychologist, she calls it a weighted blanket on the brain. Like, I am so threatened that I freeze. It's like hibernation of, when an animal plays dead. That's a human, that's what freeze is. It's a person whose nervous system basically shuts down and they freeze. They don't know what to do. And there is something called functional freeze, which is where you're continuing to live your life, but you're kind of in like a freeze state still. Your body is still in survival mode. And so you are going through the motions, but you're almost like feeling really numb all the time, feeling kind of like zoned out. And that could be a freeze response. And it can be functional freeze where you're still living your life. You're not like in bed, but you're also, your nervous system is still stuck. And then there is fawn. Fawn is people pleasing. So if you can imagine that, you see the lion, fight would be to try to fight the lion. Flight would be to try to get away from the lion, like run, avoid. Freeze would be just to stand still, literally frozen, not knowing what to do. And fawn would be to try to appease the lion. Hey, can I get you McDonald's instead? Instead of eating me, how about I get you a Happy Meal, It's to try to please the threat in order to stay safe. And that's fawn, and that's people pleasing. It is a survival mechanism. Now, what happened is when our parents came to, as immigrants, as sometimes refugees, to a new land, they were in survival mode. Why? Well, for obvious reasons. Many of them were escaping poverty or war. And the fact is that they were coming to a new foreign country where the language was new, the currency was new, the culture was new, and they weren't really sure, it basically, not just that, the religion, a different religion. And so what happened is that a lot of times the way that we were raised by immigrant parents is a type of parenting called authoritarian parenting. Now, what is authoritarian parenting? And this is not blame. This is survival. This was survival. Authoritarian parenting is the type of parenting style where, because of this survival mode, you are focused on control. And it comes back to the theme of control, where I need to control the outcome. I need to control the behavior of my child. Now, for many of our parents, this was the only parenting they ever knew. This was how they were raised. This is how their parents were raised, and their parents' parents were raised, and their parents' parents were raised. Authoritarian parenting is what we inherited. But the problem with authoritarian parenting is this. And this is where, remember how I spoke yesterday, that there are two parallel paths. There is the path of healing, and then there is the path of prevention. Everyone with me? The path of healing is, it's like this quote I heard, why does it feel like the second half of our life is all about healing from the first half? But it's very true.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But let's think about that statement for a second.
See that as a t-shirt.
My life.
I'm healing.
But then it leads me to the question of, what if we could make the first half different for the next generations? Then they wouldn't have to spend so much time in damage control, really. We could put a few therapists out of business. And that's okay. We're still going to need them. But do you get the point? And so one trajectory is the healing trajectory. But another trajectory is the prevention, changing at the root the way that we are raising the next generation. And this is where you get into the discussion of generational trauma. Okay? It is absolutely inherited. We inherit the trauma of our parents, and they inherited the trauma of their parents, and they inherited the trauma of their parents. And this is the biggest issue in our community right now. And I say that with many underlines, like bold caps, italicized. This is the biggest challenge of our community right now. More,
But not only the Muslim community.
absolutely.
It's
It's worldwide.
Yes.
But why I say our community is, number one, I'm working within our community.
Yes.
And number two is, I do believe that we have an unbelievable amount of generational trauma for several reasons, some of them political. Where are most of the refugees from? Like, where are the wars? Where's the occupations, et cetera, et cetera. There are reasons why we have a lot of generational trauma. And some of it is political. Some of it is just simply external factors, like poverty and war and being, refugees and just what we have lived through and what our parents have lived through. Many of them, partition, and before, and in many of them, war and occupation, colonialism, all of this. We have a disproportionate amount of it, right? And so how does that show up in our community? Well, I'll say this. As you travel around the world and you speak to Muslim communities, you're going to hear, I always like to ask this question. What is the biggest challenge that your community is facing? Here in Amsterdam, or here in South Africa, or here in Malaysia, or here in Indonesia. And Australia, New Zealand. I've traveled all different countries and spoken to Muslim communities. And I get a lot of different answers, right? You get things like, we're losing our youth. They are, we're losing them to gangs and drugs and alcohol. Some of them are leaving Islam at alarming rates. Domestic violence, divorce rate, problems within the family, problems within the marriage, depression, anxiety, all of these issues, mental health in general. So all of these sound like all different issues, right? Right? They actually all have the same common denominator. And that is generational trauma. That's why we have to be having these discussions, because all of the problems, all of the challenges that we have, even if you go down to gender identity, even when you go down to, I don't know who I am. I don't know if I identify as a girl or a boy or neither. All of these issues, they all have the same common denominator, and that is trauma. And so we have to be talking about that aspect. One from the side of healing and rewiring, but the other is from the side of breaking these cycles so that we can change it for the next generation. And that's where the discussion of parenting has to come in. But what's very interesting about whenever we talk about parenting, you can intellectualize until the sun, sets about parenting. But you will never be able to implement until you heal your triggers, until you are able to deal with your own emotions. And I remember I was teaching a parenting course, and one of the women, she was like, I always, I tell myself I don't want to yell at my kids, right? We also tell ourselves that. I don't want to yell at my kids, right? Because, it's not good to yell, we intellectualize that. But then I end up yelling at my kids every time. So what's happening? Because I know I don't want to yell at my kids. I know it here. I know I want to be a certain type of parent. I know it here. But I don't act on that. Why? And the reason is this. And it's actually neuroscience, by the way. Here's the reason. The brain is made up of different parts, okay? The part that we use to control our behavior, the part that we use to reason and be rational and moral reasoning is called the prefrontal cortex. Everybody with me? That's this. That's the part that's like the part that makes us human as opposed to animal. Okay? The prefrontal cortex. The part that deals with threat and survival is a completely different part of the brain. And that's called the limbic system, especially the amygdala. So I want you just to remember these terms. Now, here's what you need to remember. When you are triggered, what's a trigger? Basically, in simple terms, a trigger is what happens in the nervous system when you think there's a threat. Everyone understand? So you feel some sort of threat. Now that threat doesn't just mean a lion. That threat could be, I'm going to be rejected. I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to be accepted. I am not being respected. I don't matter. I don't have worth. I am a failure. All of these are threats to the nervous system. And so whenever we feel there's a threat, the nervous system gets triggered. And now guess what happens? The amygdala and or the limbic system takes over. Now I go into survival mode, what I began with. Fight or flight or freeze or fawn. Do you know what happens when I am triggered or when I am in survival mode or when fight or flight or freeze or fawn takes over? The prefrontal cortex goes offline. Do you understand how important that is? What did we say the prefrontal cortex controls? Our emotional regulation, our behavioral regulation, our rational thinking, our reasoning, our moral decision making. All of that is in the prefrontal cortex. So now imagine, as soon as you're triggered, you are not using all this wonderful information that you have here because it's not accessible. It's offline. What are you using? When you're triggered, what are you using? What do you default to? You're in your amygdala now. Now amygdala, they call it amygdala hijacking. The amygdala or the limbic system or the survival brain has hijacked your higher thinking. This is literally what happens when you are triggered or in survival mode. So what do you think you are operating off of when you're triggered? And this is the point I want to get to.
Fear.
Fear, yes. But fear is what triggered you. But what programming now takes over? It's your unconscious programming that was put in place when you were about 3 years old. We were programmed by the age of 5 or 6. Unconscious programming came from our parents. And that programming is what takes over when we're triggered, when you're angry, when you're scared, when you feel that you have been attacked, when you feel someone is attacking you, not just physically, but attacking maybe your worth, attacking your self-respect. When you get triggered, your programming goes back to when you were a child. And that programming is what tells you, here's how we deal with this. Here's how we deal with emotion. Here's how we deal with XYZ. It's just now unconscious programming. It doesn't matter what you read in the book. It doesn't matter what we said in the lecture, because you're not in your prefrontal cortex. It's offline. You're in programming now. So now the question is what? What do you think is the solution? By the way, this is why marriages fail. I'm telling you this right now. Very simple. This is why marriages fail. This is why children grow up in dysfunctional families. This is why we have dysfunctional parenting. This is the reason for all of it. And that is that we are not using our higher thinking when we are triggered. So what do you think is the solution? I just presented a conundrum, a problem, which is the cause of the marital breakdown. It is the cause of the problems in families. It is the cause of all of these problems. Because if you think about marriage is an opportunity to trigger each other.
Yes.
I mean, the institution of marriage is a perfect opportunity to press every single one of your buttons. Why do you think that is? I want you to imagine this analogy. Imagine that when you were a child, you developed wounds from different things that happened. You learned certain things from what was modeled. This is what you do with anger. This is what you do with conflict. Most of the time you pull up the rug and you sweep it underneath, right? Here's what you do with problems. Well, you ignore them, of course. Here's what you do when you're angry. This is how you behave when you're angry. Do you ever notice that when you're triggered, you start to act just like your parents? You might even start to talk like them.
Yes.
You will change languages. You feel that?
Yeah.
Like, if you're speaking English all the time, but then you're really angry at your kids, it'll turn to their language. Right?
Yeah.
Do you know what that is? Do you see what I'm saying? Because now you're in programming mode. You're in just unconscious you're basically modeling now. And it is not conscious. It is unconscious. You're not in control. You're not in the driver's seat. Prefrontal, offline, right? So you have all of this that has already been programmed there, right? So now the question is this. Whatever happened, so imagine whatever happened, it created bruises, wounds of different varieties. Some people have very deep wounds. Some people have gunshot wounds. Some people have knife wounds. Some people have bruising. Let's just, in this analogy, depending on what they've lived through. Some people it's very serious abuse. Some people it's neglect, et cetera, et cetera. So now imagine that you get very close to someone, which is what happens in marriage. It's what happens when you have a child. You get close. These are your intimate relationships. So when you get close to someone, what is the likelihood that you're going to bump up against their wounds? Much higher, right? Imagine you're on a crowded train. You're much more likely to bump each other. Does that make sense? And so that's why our closest relationships are the ones that trigger us the most. Does that make sense? So now if you presume that you now have this institution called marriage, where now it's an opportunity for both of you to trigger each other every single wound. And then you have children, and then they come and they bounce and jump into the wounds, right? They will open up those wounds. So what's the solution to this conundrum? What's the solution?
Reprogramming.
Okay, reprogramming. So basically, I want to put the solution in two ways. First is in the moment that I am triggered. Because in the moment that I'm triggered, I can't do, 5 years of therapy in that moment, right? And it doesn't need to be 5 years. That's not, exact. But I can't necessarily go and reprogram in the moment that I'm triggered. So what we have to have is a strategy for the moment. And then the second part is the reprogramming and the healing of the wounds. So it's two parallel paths. The one is, like right now. The other is long term. The other is, hey, I need to do the work to heal the wounds so that I am not so easily triggered. Does that make sense? I mean, is this concept making sense? The first question, what do I do in the moment? I will give you guys just a few practical strategies that are very effective according to neuroscience, to move a person out of survival brain and get the prefrontal cortex back online. Because that's the goal, isn't it? We need to be back in our prefrontal. We cannot be acting out of our survival brain, because then there's no self-control. Does that make sense? I'm just acting out of whatever I saw. If my parents punished in this way, that's what I'm gonna do. If my parents responded in this way, that's what I'm gonna do. Because that's what I was programmed with. Programming happens like before the age of 6. Okay, and this is also why when you have two people who are triggered, so let's go back to marriage. When you're now both triggering each other, what happens is that now both of you have gone back to being 6 years old. And in that interaction, you're not, 40-year-old and 35-year-old. You're 2 5-year-olds. So you can imagine why things break down. Simply put. Similarly, if you are as a parent triggered, you also go back to being that child when you're interacting with your own child. So now you've got 2 children. One's a child and one has reverted back to being a child. And this is not to insult. This is just neuroscience. This is what's happening in the nervous system. Because you've been triggered, you're now gone back to being 5 years old. And now what did your parent do to you? And now you do it. This is why a lot of times if you ask yourself, what is the thing that triggers you the most about your children? Just ask yourself that question. What is the behavior that they do that triggers you the most? Like it just presses your buttons. And I can tell you right now, that's that same behavior. When you did it as a child, you were punished. And that's that. That's why it triggers you so much. And so what's happening is, say for some people, oh, it's whining. Oh, I just cannot stand whining. Well, you can know for sure what happened to that person, that adult, that parent, when they were a child and they were whining, they probably saw some consequences. Whether that is disrespect. Well, you probably saw what happened when you dared to disrespect your parent. And that's why you get so triggered by it. Do you understand? Do you see the connection here? So how can we in the moment get our prefrontal cortex back online to save our relationships? This is literally about saving relationships. Because if you're not in your prefrontal cortex, you can do anything. From verbal abuse to physical abuse, depending on what you saw, depending on what was modeled. That's why this is so important. Everyone with me? And one thing that you will notice is that boys become their fathers. In the absence of intervention. When I say in the absence of intervention, I mean if a boy has an abusive father and there is intervention, meaning whatever happened where the child was removed maybe, or there was some type of intervention, or the father got therapy, etc., etc. In the absence of that, in the absence of intervention, boys grow up and become their fathers. And this is one of the most consistent phenomena. And this is the reason why I always try to remind women to be very conscious of who they marry and who they stay married to. Why? Because it must be who you want your son to become. Did everyone hear that? I'm just going to repeat that. Be very conscious. We as women have to be very conscious who we marry and who we stay married to, because it must be someone you want. It must be the person that you want your son to become, because he will, in the absence of intervention. And this is just fitrah. We model, especially with the alpha. When it comes to men, it's like the wolf pack. The alpha is the dad. Like, that's just divine design. This is just wiring. The alpha is the father. The father says jump, that boy says how high. You just tell me how high, dad. And they will model their fathers. And even if, and this is what's really interesting, even if they don't want to, they will have to actually do work to not resort to that when they're triggered. Does that make sense? So now with regards to mothers also are modeling for their daughters in specific. And I'll give you an example of how I've seen this play out. Whenever I observe a woman who is passively accepting abuse, by and large, she watched her mother do the same. And when I say passively accepting abuse, I don't just mean that she is passively accepting, physical abuse, but I mean, for example, if she is passively accepting infidelity, cheating, disrespect on all sorts of levels, by and large, she watched her mother do the same. This is what I mean. This is generational trauma in practical action. And so it's so important that we understand. We decide whether we are going to break these cycles or whether we are going to continue these cycles. And please know that your children are watching. They will not listen to what you say, but boy, will they listen to what you do. They are watching what you do. It's literally their blueprint. Whether they like it or not, this is unconscious. Unless they do the work to literally rewire it. And it is work. And most people aren't even aware of it. So this is why as mothers and as fathers, it is so important. Our children are watching. And a lot of times I see women where they think, I am going to sacrifice myself. And I am going to continue in this burning house. And I'm going to continue in this burning house for the sake of my children. In other words, I am going to stay in a burning house and I'm going to keep my children in a burning house for their sake. Seems a little bit irrational, but this is exactly the thinking, right? But even when when mothers think that I am going to sacrifice myself, I'll take it, but for my children's sake, I want to remind them that the children will suffer alongside, because the children are going to continue that pattern in their life. When it comes to growing up in a house that's on fire, one of two things happens, and this is how the pattern continues, is that when we grow up in a home that is dysfunctional or on fire and there is abuse in some level, one of two outcomes happens. Either the child grows up to be the abuser and model the abuser, or the child grows up and marries the abuser. And that's how it continues. Because when you grow up in a house that is dysfunctional, the nervous system prefers a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. We don't like things that are not familiar. We don't like things that are uncertain. If I am familiar with dysfunction, that is what I'm going to always gravitate towards, because that's where I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable in dysfunction because that's all I've known. And so this is why it's so important that not just for our own sake, but for our children's sake, that we break those cycles. So now in the moment, let's go back to in the moment. I'm triggered. How do I get my prefrontal cortex back online? All right, number one, pause. Number one is pause. Because a lot of times what happens is, see, when you're in survival mode, you're not responding, you are reacting. It's like a immediate, sort of like a reflex. So first thing is introduce the pause. Do not react right away. Everyone with me? So pausing. Number one. And I want you guys to take note of this. Number two, name what you're feeling. Name it. Actually name it. I am feeling triggered. I am feeling overwhelmed. I am very anxious. I am angry. Just name it.
Name it to ourselves.
Name it to yourself. You don't need to tell. It's not about the other person. This is about this is all about regulating myself in the moment that I am triggered. Everyone with me? This is the regulation of myself in the moment that I am triggered. I name it to myself. I can write it down. I can name it out loud, but I have to name it. Now, what does naming do? Naming forces your brain to go into the prefrontal cortex. Because you can't name something in the survival brain. You're using your prefrontal cortex to name. This is why there's the recommendation of journaling. Because journaling forces your brain out of survival into prefrontal cortex. Because you can't take pen to paper without engaging your prefrontal cortex. Remember, that's our goal. We need our prefrontal cortex back online. I need self-control. I need to be able to access what I know. You know what I'm saying? I need to access what I've read. I need to access what I've learned and what I believe. So name it to tame it. Got it? So naming it, writing it down, journaling. Number two. Number three, actually splashing cold water on your face. And this is very interesting because what did the Prophet ﷺ say when you're angry to do? He said wudu. Do you know that there is something in the human body called the diving reflex, in which when you put very cold water on the face, it calms the nervous system immediately. It's one of the quickest ways to physiologically calm the nervous system. What we're trying to do here is move the nervous system out of fight or flight, freeze and fawn, out of survival into regulation. Okay? In neuroscience, this is moving out of the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. Calm. Right? So this is the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. This is like your adrenaline, your cortisol, your blood pressure. You're just like your body is in a heightened state to protect you from the lion. Some people live chronically in that state. And that is why we get sick. That's actually the root cause of chronic illness. See, the root cause of autoimmune disease is chronically living in the sympathetic mode of the nervous system. It's chronic fight or flight, freeze or fawn. It's chronic, meaning it's not like it goes, it turns on and then you relax. You're always in that heightened threat mode. That's why we get sick. That is actually the root cause of cancer, autoimmune disease, and all other illnesses. Inflammation in general. Fibromyalgia, like just pain, chronic pain, and you don't know why. It's that I am chronically in my fight or flight. And so we want to move out of, so the diving reflex, just putting cold water on your face, taking like something very cold like ice or an ice pack and putting it on the back of your neck. Do you know what all of these things do? They trigger something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is what controls this switch between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. You guys understand that? So we want to switch from sympathetic to parasympathetic because we don't want to get sick and we don't want to destroy our relationships. Everybody with me? Are we motivated? How do you do that? You got to engage the vagus nerve. So one of the ways to engage the vagus nerve is actually ice to the back of the neck. Cold water to the face. Some studies ice to the wrist. And then finally is breathing. It's called box breathing. Basically, you inhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, exhale 8 seconds. This signals to your nervous system there's no lion, you're safe, you can calm down and go into parasympathetic. Useful, inshallah? Okay, that's in the moment. Obviously, we say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. The problem is when we are really triggered and someone says say A'udhu billah, you want to punch them. Right? That's the point. The point is we're not in our minds. So this is why we got to really calm ourselves down so that we can rationally respond with things like A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And yes, shaitan makes anger. Shaitan adds fuel to fire. Shaitan will add fuel to your fire. So yes, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And this is part of the pause as well. Okay, and this is advice from the Prophet ﷺ. He said, make wudu. If you're standing, sit. That's part of the pause. That's part of telling your body, calm down. He says, if you're sitting, lay down. What is that doing? That's encouraging your body to get out of fight or flight. It's encouraging your body to switch out of the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. Because I'm literally sitting down. I'm telling my nervous system, it's safe. There's no lion. I'm sitting. Look, I'm sitting. And then if I'm sitting, look, I'm laying down. Everything's okay. Calm down. You're not being threatened. There's no lion. Your child is just freaking out. A lot of times when a child is having a temper tantrum, anyone have kids at that age? Okay, temper tantrum. A lot of times it'll trigger the parent. It'll trigger the parent. And so what parenting experts say is, hold boundaries, but with kindness. You don't punish a child for a temper tantrum, and the reason you don't punish a child for a temper tantrum is that the child's prefrontal cortex is not developed until they're like 25 or 30 years old. In other words, they don't have the wiring to control their behavior entirely. So you can't punish them for that. But what you can do is you hold the boundaries. You're throwing a temper tantrum because you want to buy the toy. We can't buy the toy. Can't have the cookie, but you do it with kindness, not with punishment. So boundaries with kindness. So this is firm but kind. Okay. This is the principle of what is called gentle or positive parenting. And it is very aligned with Islamic values. So the main issue though, the main focus when your child is dysregulated and is throwing a temper tantrum is actually to just regulate yourself. Because you're going to get triggered. Why are you going to get triggered? Well, number one, they're embarrassing you if you're in public. And everyone's going to look and say, what kind of stupid parent is this that can't control their child? Oh, this is a bad parent because the child is bad. Look at the bad behavior. So we're all of these things are coming in our minds and it's triggering us. So It's about calming ourselves in that moment. So this is very important. These techniques. Okay. Let me pause there, inshallah. Subhanakallah wa bihamdaka ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. I had some hands coming up, so I want to leave time for that. I think you had your hand up earlier. No, behind.
I don't. I feel like this lecture was written for me. I was actually gonna ask you, when you started talking about it, you know how you said the sons become like the father even if they don't want to? And then my question is going to be like, oh, what about the moms? Because I feel like in growing up in my household, we definitely had the alpha, immigrant father, may Allah bless him. And my sister and I, it hits much later. Like we realized like recently that we're actually nothing like our mom. We're just like our dad, and we're like the alphas in our relationships, in our marriages. And I don't know if it's because, my mom, she's an angel, and she took a lot of stuff over the years, and so did my grandmother. And
Yeah. I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying to play. So are you the oldest or the second?
No, I'm the second.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
But
so
my sister's like the opposite of me and how she reacts versus me. But
she's
like,
the oldest. You missed that discussion in the
I
first
know.
the first 15 minutes was
I
all
know,
about
you recorded
yeah, I'm
that.
recording it. I don't know if we recorded that part, but
Oh, no. Okay.
the first 15 minutes was all about oldest sister and second
Oh my
oldest
gosh,
sister.
okay.
Oldest and then second, like the Elsa and the Anna.
Yes,
And
yes.
yeah.
Oh my god, everyone says that. That's funny.
It's true, yeah, it's a thing. So what sometimes happens, so trauma cycle, so the trauma responses do not always show up as exact modeling. Sometimes it's the opposite extreme. Sometimes it's called over correcting.
We talk about this as family, so that's
Yes.
why I'm not exposing it.
Yeah, no. We don't know. Yeah. Sometimes it shows up as overcorrection. So for example, if you had a very aggressive, maybe if you had a very quarrelsome parent, and then you're like, I don't want to be anything like that, so I'm going to be the opposite. I'm going to be very passive. Or the other way around. You saw that your mother was very passive, or a parent was very passive, and you're like, I don't want to be anything like that. So then you go to the other extreme of maybe being more aggressive. So it's sometimes it's an overcorrection, and the point is that's still a trauma response.
Right.
That's
So
still
you're saying we're not like we never thought about being like this. It's just how we are. That's what we say because
it's programming.
and my
Yeah.
brothers are actually like my mom.
Yeah.
It's just so weird. So that's what
It's a lot of it. What happens is it's unconscious,
Okay.
but it is what I want you to understand is that it was wired as a survival mechanism. It's survival, and the only way to rewire it is to get out of survival mode.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's about finding safety and realizing that, okay, I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm not that little boy anymore who was trapped or who was in this situation. And now I can do things differently. So it's rewiring by finding safety.
Oh, because it's not nothing to do with the gender, really.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, typically boys will model their fathers, especially when they're triggered. So they might just be like totally different.
Yeah.
Totally different when, like, different hobbies, different interests, but when they're triggered, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but when you're like, your son is triggered or whatever, all of a sudden you just see your husband in it. Like, it's like all of a sudden he's talking like him, he's gesturing like he's making his face like him. It's like it's so
So they're like my mom.
Interestingly.
But they're also like my dad. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
You're picking two.
sometimes yeah.
SubhanAllah. Okay.
SubhanAllah. Any other yes. Oh, you had your hand up, Sark, next. Yeah, go ahead.
What would you call a stressor? Because I learned in school like what the difference between a stressor and a trigger. Like I'm like, what's the difference?
Okay, so I think what you mean by that. So her question is, what's the difference? What is a stressor and what is a trigger? I guess the way that I would define it is that a stressor is something that, it's like a challenge and you have to respond to that challenge. So for example, going to the gym, that's a stressor, right? Okay, I gotta lift this weight. or running a marathon, that's a stressor. Having to go quickly to catch a flight, and you're running and you're afraid you're gonna miss, that's a stressor. A trigger is something that touches a wound. A trigger touches a wound. So a stressor is not necessarily going to put you in fight or flight. It might temporarily to get you to, you're gonna be like, oh, my adrenaline is up because I gotta catch this flight. But that's different than something that touches a deep wound. That's a trigger. And when someone has more wounds, they're more easily triggered and more often. So it's like they're constantly triggered. It's like, okay, it's like walking on eggshells. Who's next? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about that specific point about how like boys model their father. So like what if you have like an absent parent, like an absent father, who does that child model themselves after?
Well, that's the thing, is that again, in the absence of intervention, so sometimes intervention may be, and I included in that is if there's a distance between that boy and that father. There may be certain things that they model of what they know, but if there is an absence there, then that's a vacuum that's going to be filled by someone else. Because we as human beings, we always need a model, right? So what happens is when there is an absence of a healthy model, then it might be filled by an unhealthy model. It could be Andrew Tate, like it could be anything, it's like, it could be a sports star. It could be an actor. It could be, a boxer. It could be the guys at school. Like it could be anything else. And this is why it's so important that we do have a good model, because human beings need models. Like as women, we need models. What does it mean to be a woman? As men, what does it mean to be a man? And if there isn't a healthy model, the problem is media, and in specific social media, will give them another model. Yeah, and this is also like it's recently come to my attention that young men are really, really being targeted. Like, and I don't just say that like as a like theoretically. No, they're literally being targeted. Like, for example, I found out that like if a young man makes a social media account, he will like his feed will look very different than my feed. Like my feed is all like psychology, okay? And like relationship stuff and neuroscience stuff, right? His feed's gonna be like pornographic stuff. His feed's gonna be like red pill. It's gonna basically be those two things, like Andrew Tate stuff and porn and soft porn. Like, and this isn't even something he's choosing, it's just in his face. It's like, and that's really scary, because what that is if there isn't a strong model and a strong, good, healthy example for these boys, something else will come and fill that. And that something else is very, very toxic. Like, we talk about toxic masculinity or whatever that is. What is that? That's the absence of true masculinity and any kind of example of true masculinity. So it gets filled with this toxic idea of that. What does it mean to be a man? And women are the enemy, you know what I mean? It's us against them, and this just, it's like women are the enemy, but they're also objects. It's like so toxic. It's so they're just to be used, you know what I mean? But they're also like, it's us against them. So this is why we need healthy role models, especially our boys. And that's why I'm saying our men are under attack, like actively under attack. It's almost like if you're a boy and you're making like an Instagram page, you have to say you're like 50 years old. So at least you can they'll like chill a little. I'm serious. Like, because I have older sons, and like, there's like, we can't even go on Instagram. And I didn't know that. Like, we don't even, it's like, you're not going to that content. That content's coming to you and it is bombarding you.
Oh yeah, they don't have to search.
That is sick. That's very upsetting. And then it's in between is the red pill stuff, the Andrew Tate stuff. So it's like, which way do you go? So that's a big problem. That's why we need involved fathers, and good role models for the men, for the boys. I think, yeah.
You know, this is very true what you're talking about, but there's another frontier that our community is just coming into as the immigrant community.
Yeah.
And that's a lot more of, we have a lot more aging people.
Yeah.
How do we preventatively, manage some of that aging trauma that is about to hit us as immigrant communities?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You can continue and then I'll repeat.
Yeah.
So how do you mean? Can you explain further?
Our families back home are extended families, and your parent gets old, you continue what you're doing because somebody's there. They may be sitting there, but somebody's giving, children are coming. But here, if your parents are with them, they're in an apartment by themselves, and both of you are at work, and you don't even know if they've eaten their sandwich or not.
Yeah.
What's the next thing? It's daycares and nursing home, and no language, no food, nothing, no culture. And I think that's one thing that our communities are really, sort of
Facing,
we're facing,
No, absolutely.
but we're not addressing.
No, you're right.
We're not addressing, and I find it quite alarming.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've gone through it and taking care of my parents long distance, and I see it, and I'm an only child.
Yeah.
So it's so that when you're talking about the second part, the preventative.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, okay, we're talking a lot about children,
Yes.
raising children, but now it's our responsibility to take care of our elders.
Yeah.
Which is sort of the same kind of a thing in a way.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. It's a very good point. So I'll repeat that question. Her question was basically like it's very important to talk about the aspect of raising our children, but we have another crisis, which is our aging part of the community, right? The senior citizens, the elderly. And what about the challenge of looking after our ailing parents or our aging parents? It's a very, very good question. And one of the things that I would say is that just like everything else in life, we have to seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because none of us can do it on our own. We have to seek help from Allah and then seek help from community. So it goes in that order. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, and then we seek help from others after that. You're right about the breakdown of the village. That's part of obviously what is contributing to this crisis, because now we have nuclear families. We don't have that support system. I mean, I personally, in a very similar situation, my mother, my father died, Allah yarhamu, a few years ago. And my mother, she's in need of a lot of care. And, we were fortunate enough to have that she has a sister in Egypt who herself, she never was able to get married. She didn't have a family of herself, so she's able to really support her. But see, again, it goes to that village, it goes to that. But if we don't have that, it's very difficult. But we have to, again, seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask Allah to make it easy for us to do right by our parents, to do the best that we can with our parents. Ihsan is a very difficult level, but Allah has asked us to do ihsan with our parents. So we have to seek help from Allah in doing that. And then second, we have to have community support. We have to have, if we don't have the family, we have to create the village, and seek that help from each other.
If I may follow on that one, because you're in that upper echelon of our community thinkers and all that how can we raise that awareness? Because I'm very passionate about this aspect. And actually, when I was sharing with one of the young girls, if something doesn't exist, you create it.
Yeah,
because
you're right.
10 years ago, along with funds,
Yeah.
we created an organization.
Yeah. I mean, it almost feels like, like you made me think of something, right? Like if with our children, for example, when we didn't find, what we needed in the schools. What did we create? We created homeschooling, right? We created, or Islamic schools. So like we created communities, and a lot of times, especially in the US, we're very privileged, which is that we have homeschooling communities, right? Where people come together, support each other in that. What, you know, what if we did that with the elderly, you know, where there are communities that come together, Islam in the Muslim community, so that you're not with, you know, not strangers, and the you know, the elderly are not feeling displaced in, like you said, a nursing home or even a day center.
Where's my doll?
Yeah, where's my doll?
You know,
So yeah.
Where's my doll?
No, exactly.
But,
No, exactly.
You know, but
Yeah.
I want to make only one message here, because, by the way, check out olivecs.org, and you'll see something. Like, I've been in conversation with Islam leadership, and they're all elders, and they're not even thinking about elders and elder care. Well, they're themselves elders. You sit in Shura Council. You know, the 4 priorities for the next X many years of Islam, there's nothing about elders or elder care.
Wow.
I was
Okay.
last year, I'm missing their meeting this week, but it was last year I was invited, and I asked the question. You know, I sit in, I'm from Southern California, so we sit in a Shura Council meeting, and they're talking about how many burial plots we have, how many additional.
We're waiting for them to die. We're just waiting.
Honest. And I put up
All right, come on already.
what about the years from before you go
You know
to
what?
the
That's a
burial
really that's a
plot?
really good
You're not
point.
thinking about
That's
that?
a really good point. Thank you for bringing that
You
up.
know,
Yeah.
you're not thinking about
I mean, you're
these
right.
years.
You're right. I mean, me and my sisters are in that situation, and you know, like I said, my parents didn't have sons. You know,
Well, same.
yeah, exactly. So I'm in the same situation in that sense, but you're right. I never, you know, it's almost like it's like something that we're dealing with between the 3 of us. But you're right. It is a community, also a community issue. You're right.
Very
You're
much
right.
is a-
You're right.
it's a community issue, and it's my frustration right now.
Even if it's just social interaction. One thing I would say is, even if it's just social programs, like to just visit, you know, because I know that makes a big difference for my mom. You know, to have that social interaction is the difference between deteriorating and not. So, like, it's so important.
You know, I'll share 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Social interaction. We were in an Olive program, and going around the room, and a former librarian, a marketing researcher, saying, "What are you doing?" Waiting to die. Now, listen to this, a lady from among our community. 2 years later, she is the best dressed one, and happy, and having
Mashallah.
lunches, having teas.
The same one who said she was waiting to die?
Yes.
So what changed?
Community programming,
That's
coming
amazing.
together.
That's
Olive
amazing.
Community Services changed that for
Well,
us.
mashallah, that's
And
amazing.
we need those
I
all over the
completely
place.
agree with you.
I
I've
don't
seen
know
it.
if you've heard about it.
I haven't heard of it. I used to live in Southern California, but I don't. I live in the East Coast now. But absolutely. I mean, I've seen that with the need for that.
This is really, really the next frontier for
Yeah.
our community.
Absolutely.
Can I?
Yeah. Oh yeah. If it's related, yeah.
Yeah. So in where I live, in the state that I live in, we have a big, huge plot of land right now, and we're trying to figure out what do we put on this land. Yeah, the masjid has
There
a
was a
whole,
cemetery.
like a whole campus. No. So far, no cemetery. But I did bring up the idea of like senior living, assisted living for our seniors who. It could be culturally sensitive, religiously sensitive, you know. And you know who gave me the most pushback? Were the elders.
Yeah.
And not the ones who need the care, but the ones who don't need the care.
Yeah.
What was the pushback about?
Well, they were
Their
like,
kids should do it. Their kids
Their
should do
kids
it.
should
I
do
knew
it.
it. I knew it.
Take care of your parents.
Yeah. Oh, I knew that would
When
be the
I said
pushback.
that, when
I knew
brought
it.
up,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
take care of your
Yeah.
parents in your
What do you
home.
mean? What do you mean? You do it. Well, you're supposed to do it.
That was one, and then the second one was, well, we already planned for that for ourselves. why didn't they plan for themselves?
How did they plan for it other than their kids have to do it? No, I'm talking about the money. I'm talking about the care.
Well, you get care with money sometimes.
Well,
right?
well,
So, like,
well, about 12,000 a month, but not a reasonable.
More than
two things were
They're pancakes. Is that what?
Mom, I mean, I was saying tuna sandwiches, and somebody took offense that I love my tuna sandwiches. But I mean, it's
Yeah. But again, that's the whole idea of take care of them in the home. That requires a very high level of resources, and it's almost like assuming that there is a stay-at-home designated person. What if there isn't? What if there isn't? So doesn't in this context, it doesn't work anymore. It's not like it was in the village. We have to find an alternative. So the problem is that a lot of people, their mentality is still stuck back home, even though their body is here.
But guess what? They're also the ones who came here who didn't have to take care of their elders.
Exactly.
The most
Oh, I
ironic
know.
part of the
Oh,
whole
don't I know it? Don't I know it?
situation.
The ones who left their parents
Yes.
back home,
Yes.
but now they're totally entitled. Yes, I know. Subhanallah. What? Okay, so we have one more, inshallah. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say I'm actually a palliative care physician, so my patients, this is
Yeah.
the brunt of my work, and I see